There ought to be a law, and I've told you this before. See if you'd all just heard me out, we'd not have this uproar. I know what's best for all of you, and I think we can agree. There are some things upon this earth we all do wish to flee. Thieves and sneaks and groups of men, all manners of villainy. Honestly, to let these go would be buffoonery. So isn't it only logical to isolate these crimes? A sour wound to make pure, we must extract the grimes. And so to quickly solve this, in sand we must draw lines, and declare henceforth for all to hear where the light no longer shines. All past this threshold are true threats to thee, everything outside these walls, in fact all that is not me. For in my ivory tower, from whose windows I do peek, I look through stained glass windows, and my past gives them their chic. And from my childhood shapings, and the whispers on the street, a sense of self is crystallized, this form on these 2 feet. From this self now radiates a certain way to behave. For heavens, it was even mentioned on dear grandfather's grave. The ones around me know this, and the ones that came before. The force of peers and heritage can pin a certain man to the floor. A brutal force of gravity, this witness is to most, and is the primary shaping force behind a great many folks. From this hardened inner pattern, decrees are easily made, for thinking deeply isn't hard when you throw away the spade. All is made much simpler, this is inarguably true. When each question is already worked, you've got so much time for you. Enough, in fact, to do a thing most natives never find the time, to brew manifold neuroses, and even careers around them find. As crazy is so commonplace amongst the civilized, that sanity has been outlawed, its light doth burn their eyes. For today's polished businessman now has instincts to his core. To assert the self or dictate what is right is a task he must ignore. Experts now take care of this in groups most specialized, isolated from the rest so their views are sterilized. And from these pockets of perception, words of so-called men, we recycle public opinion so as to not offend. For the animals of this century that the majority rush to be, make me ponder on the Shih Tzu, and did the wolf foresee just what the repercussions were for chumming up to man, allowing him to make life easy, hunger's abated by his hand. With all the so-called evils and hardships gone from life, a rapid process undergoes, no animal escapes this strife. In direct correlation with the stresses being removed, we see the wolfish nature fade, and softness now improves. Ears that were once sharp now only listen for the bowl. The legs that could once run all night now barely can they stroll. A fraction of what they once were are the most comfortable. Do I even need to explain why that would rhyme with vulnerable? A plant kept in a humid room, delicately mothered over, would find itself dead in a day, given reality's true exposure. Again, most paradoxically, nature is playing games with you. Over instinct to protect can destroy a species on review. For the things that are of nature are all held to their shape by the constant threats and pressures that all living beings face. A focus held too tightly burns all within its view. To focus only on potentials, then only fear will you accrue. In a state of apprehension, inner vision does go dark, an internal autopilot then asserts itself to remark. Called forth from the unconscious at a speed that's lightning quick, patterns of peers and childhood surge forth to do magic. Without an ounce of thinking, no minerals need be spent. The organism may react and allow itself to vent. The state of fear calls for this. Obviously we must conserve the resources needed to both flee and still have reserves. Biology is simple to a state we cannot comprehend, that the above simple feedback loop, if pointed out, still offends. Obviously you cannot think if you are in a state of panic. I know you've seen this on TV and laughed at the characters manic. But still I'll offend the masses by pointing this thing out, that as soon as apprehensions rise, minds fog and fill with doubt. This is such a well-known tool now, masses movable in bulk, reminding me of schools of fish and how dolphins around them skulk. See this for what it is now, and look again at all around, for we are still in the jungle, and dangers still abound. You are geared to survive here, and like water will you flow. As most things here, given the choice, downhill you'd rather go. All who are not conscious of this trait of the flesh are destined to seek external safety and idols to possess. Comfort is a killer, whose kiss is sweet as sin. My stars, does it feel good and warm you from within? But if this sense of safety wasn't built by your own hands, the soul inside will always know you're an underling to demands. You cannot lie to the animal whose form you now inhabit. Are you predator, prey, or more here? Wolf, man, or rabbit? Rise above the animal nature, tame the fears within. Most all of it's born of ignorance, so the mind you must strengthen. And before you get mad at me, a question I must pen. If there ought to be a law is all that keeps us from pissing on the floor, how do we call ourselves men?